Welcome back to the Bullpen podcast, where we dive into real conversations with business leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers about what it really takes to build success with purpose. Today, I'm joined by Chris Luger, a retired enterprise tech professional, real estate investor, and founder of Heavy Metal Money, a blog and podcast where he takes an unapologetically raw and entertaining approach to personal finance. After building a long career in technology, including 6 years with Apple, Chris has turned his focus towards helping others gain financial freedom towards honest, accessible advice rooted in real life. He's also the president and executive director of the Luger Foundation, which provides financial support to families facing massive medical debt from premature births or NICU stays. Chris is a self-proclaimed late bloomer to the financial independence movement and a Twin Cities community builder who's proving that financial literacy can be smart, gritty, and even a little rock and roll. In this episode, we'll talk about what inspired Chris to launch his foundation, the philosophy behind Heavy Metal Money, and the leadership lessons that have shaped his journey from the corporate world to early retirement and beyond. Chris, welcome to the Bullpen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun. Thank you so much.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. So let's do that right now.
Yeah, man.
So the Luger Foundation does incredible work helping families dealing with NICU and pregnancy-related medical debt. What inspired you to start this?
Yeah, so the story really, it goes all the way back to when I was born. So if you go back to, 52 years ago, 1973, I was born early, like 2.5 months early, and I was in the NICU for about 64 days is what my dad told me. And at the time, my dad had basically about $250,000 in medical bills for my stay and then my mom's emergency C-section. Again, if you were to do the math now per inflation, that would be about $1.2 million today. Just blows your mind, right? And that's what often what's referred to as $1 million babies now. If you have a preemie that's in the NICU for that long, they can easily hit that $1 million mark. It costs about $3,000 a day to have a newborn in the NICU, which is just blows your mind. Yeah. So anyway, my dad, after 2.5 months, I'm home and I'm healthy and everything's fine. My dad went to the hospital to set up a payment plan to start paying back, paying off these medical bills. And the hospital came back to him and said, yeah, your bill is paid for in full anonymously. And it's just remarkable, right? I mean, there is generosity in the world. There are people doing some amazing things. And so that has been rolling around in my head my entire life, right? From when I was a child, my dad kind of shared that story with me. And, we never really knew, like, was it, anonymous stranger? We don't really know. There was some times when we thought, maybe was that grandma and grandpa? We don't really know, But yeah, it was one of those things where it's been kind of rolling around in my head. And I was like, man, I wish there was a way I could kind of pay it forward, right? I want to pay it forward. And then it wasn't until around 2019, 2020, where I was listening to another story about someone that had twins, and those twins were in the NICU, right? They were born early, and after so many days in the NICU, they had actually lost one of the twins, which is just, it's so sad. But then once they were home, they still had like about $30,000 in medical debt. And so just imagine, again, every time they have to pay that bill, it's a reminder of what they had lost. And it just was like, they shouldn't have to worry about that. Like, I wish there was something more I could do. And that's like literally the next day, I went to the Minnesota Secretary of State website and I started a company. I mean, and that's when the Luger Foundation was born. And that's what I'm doing. So basically, it's my story and how we can pay it forward.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful impetus to keep things moving. And I'm, we'll chat about it more, but I'm glad yeah, glad to hear things are going so well with it.
Yeah,
Can you share a story, obviously with, not disclosing any personal
sure.
information, but share a story on how the foundation has helped someone and a story that really stuck with you?
Yeah, there are several, but I know this one family, they had actually went to the doctor for just a normal prenatal visit. And it's one of those things where you never expect what could happen at those visits. And so it was one where, and again, this was the story that was kind of communicated to us, and the ultrasound tech kind of, you know, I don't want to say panic, but looked concerned and went out and grabbed a doctor right away. And the doctor came into the room and told this family, go home, don't pack a bag, go straight to the hospital. Like, it would be faster for them just to leave calmly, drive to the hospital, then, get an ambulance, get over there, all that stuff. And they discovered again, once they got to the hospital, that their baby in utero had had stopped growing, which was interesting. I know, it was really interesting. So, there was little to no amniotic fluid, and the baby was measuring about 3 weeks behind in size, right? And so low birth weight. Emergency C-section at 29 weeks. Um, but then what happened after that too is that there were there were continuing kind of complications, because after the baby was delivered via C-section, there was issues where the belly was kind of distended. They you know, kept filling up with air. They didn't really know what was happening, and they had to do like exploratory surgery. And get this, the surgeons found a zero point 0.5 centimeter hole in the baby's stomach. Right, and they had to, actually perform surgery. They called it, like a gastric perforation, and so all in all, this family were their baby was in the NICU for 88 days, and it was through help that, I mean, the donations and the gifts that we received, we were able to help things like home cooked meals, Uber Eats gift cards. They're spending days, weeks away from home and work, hotel rooms to stay while they were there close to the hospital. And it was also being able to get care and help for their current older daughter. I think that's one of the biggest things that people kind of forget, is that families, well, you may need to get childcare, someone to watch your current kids while you're at the hospital for weeks at a
Mhm.
time. And so that was one thing that, again, it's just kind of all of these series of things that happened, all from just a regular doctor visit. You go in thinking everything's going to be fine, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, something may not be right here. But yeah, that's one that really kind of sticks out to me. Um, yeah. So again, there are several, but that one, it really kind of hits home for me for sure.
Yeah, and obviously when something like that happens, it is the complete center of your universe. But then,
Mm,
yeah, I think people, and when people forget that things just keep moving, so there's so many external things that come in, the places to
totally.
stay, meals, all that.
Forget Yeah, people often forget even parking passes at the hospital,
Yeah.
right? You're gonna go there and you kind of forget the fact that, you still need to park. And even at discounted parking, you can be spending, like 30, 50, $70 a week just to park at the hospital where you need to be anyway, you know? So, yeah, so it's really great that, again, due to the generous support from our donors, we're able to help families with those needs.
That's great. And you
Yeah.
just wrapped up your very first Harvest for Hope 5K. What takeaways did you have from that event, and what's in store for 2026?
Oh, wow. Thank you, man. So, it was a lot of work, but it was so rewarding. Yeah, our very first 5K event. This is our very first in-person kind of community-driven event. It was so humbling and just wonderful that all these people came together. This is our very first event here in north of the Twin Cities in Minnesota, here in Forest Lake. And we had 65 people register, which again was great for our very first event. We raised over $5,000 that we can now help our families, right? It was just great to see so many people that came from all over. I mean, I was doing my very best to introduce myself and to talk with all the families and all the people that were participating. And it was, I mean, people came from all over. People drove miles to be here, and it was just amazing. And so, like I said, I'm just so grateful, and I'm trying not to get choked up here, but they next year we're going to be bigger and better. Some of the feedback that we got, some of the first things were people asking. They would send me an email asking if there was going to be children's activities, which in all honesty, I didn't even think of, right? I was so busy with some of the other stuff, and it definitely made sense. So we're going to do our best next year to have specific child 1Ks or something like that, like kiddie fun runs. We're going to do more to have more activities and food trucks and stuff available next year. Because one thing also that I come to realize, there were so many people that were there not really participating in the walk and run themselves, but they're cheering on their kids or their coworkers or whatever. And so I want to make sure we have activities for them and things that we can do. So yeah, next year it's going to be great. And we've been talking now with the board. We're going to aim to do at least some in-person fundraising event every quarter. So there's a lot of things we got planned. We're thinking of doing, in addition to the 5K, doing pickleball, beanbags, maybe a golf tournament someday. We don't know. So we're gonna be do a lot of fun things.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
But
man.
hey, great first start. Lots to learn from and improve on, and just keep pressing forward. From a leadership standpoint, how is running a nonprofit different from the tech and business ventures you've led in the past?
That's a great question. I think it really is finding and partnering with those people that are aligned with the same passion, right? So I know when I first started the Luger Foundation, it was really easy for me just to approach friends that I had, right? And say, hey, you want to be the treasurer for this new nonprofit venture that I'm starting? And they're my friend. And they would say, sure. But, I didn't do any sort of research into, not necessarily are they qualified, but what else are they bringing to the foundation? Are they bringing a network of supporters? Um, you know, are they bringing other skills and expertise, stuff like that? But also, are they really aligned with what our mission is? How personal is it to them? And so that's one of the biggest things is, it's I think it's more so finding those people that you can, um, I guess, grow together with. I think that's one thing. I mean, because, we really are kind of treated like, I'm treating it kind of like a startup, right? You know what I mean? So I look at it really as this scrappy little nonprofit that we're doing whatever we can to kind of help families. Yeah. That's kind of, I guess, kind of the differences, I think, where rather than just managing people and processes like you would like in a corporate environment, this one is you are trying to manage impact and influence, that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe a more nonprofit, the greater good. I think there's greater goods in both, but they're different.
Mhm.
They're different,
Yes,
very different. Yes, awesome.
absolutely.
So let's talk heavy metal money. It's such a great name. Let's go. Where did that concept come from, and how does heavy metal tie into finance?
Yeah, man. So, I was thinking, how can I kind of bring these passions together? Right. So at the time I was learning personal finance. I was kind of accelerating my path to financial independence and financial freedom. And there was so many conversations, so many things that I wanted to do to share my story, to help influence others and help people with financial literacy and, kind of understanding kind of those basic financial principles that are not they're not taught in schools, right? And so I wanted to do that, and I just started thinking, what is something that is truly me? Like, what are my passions? And I like my music kind of extreme, and so I took them, merged them together, built a tagline, extreme personal finance. And I just look at it as it's all about saving, investing, earning, and spending, all turned up to 11. I get the question all the time. Well, it's like, hey, I don't listen to heavy metal. can I still read your blog? And I'm like, of course. I just every now and then will have a music reference or a link to a YouTube video of this song that reminds me of this thing or something like that, right? But yeah, so they're not dependent on each other. It's just kind of my little homage to metal. I just reference it in my podcast or in my writing for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. It makes it all the more enjoyable to tie in personal passions along
Oh,
with
totally.
finance and combining the two. So, what's one financial myth you love to smash on your blog or your podcast?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth I would like to smash is I think the concept of retirement is outdated.
Mm.
I think we need to crush the myth that is you need to just work until 65 and then retire. I think it's complete garbage, right? I think that most people don't necessarily have an income problem. I think they have a direction problem. I think that most people think that financial independence is kind of this distant fantasy. Right? Well, those are just for the rich people. Those are for people that make way more money than me. But I honestly think it's a math and mindset problem. And so if you can shift your mindset, I think with clarity, with consistency, and a plan, I think people can achieve retirement. And I quote retirement in quotes because I consider myself retired, but now I work just as many hours as I did before. It's just on other things. It gives you the freedom and the choices to do those things that you may care about where you don't necessarily need to make a paycheck to do them. Right. And again, like I said, I retired at 50. I didn't have some magic secret code to do that. Right. I learned how to make money work for me instead of constantly working for it, if that makes sense. So I think that that's the one thing just to crush is that you don't need to that default playbook of I'm going to, go to school, get a job, work until I'm 65 and then you die. That is not you know, I would worry then you'll run out of life, right? You're going to be too old to enjoy the things that you want to do. You're going to be, you know, that's why I want to do some of those things now before my knees start hurting, stuff like that. So I think that's the big myth. It doesn't have to be
Definitely.
that way, especially now, I mean, especially 2025, man, there are so many ways for people to earn additional streams of income, to increase your earnings. There are definitely ways that you can retire earlier than 65.
That's awesome. Well, check out Heavy Metal Heavy Metal Money to figure it out, learn
Heck
more.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, of
absolutely.
course, of course. So, how do you define leadership today now that you've transitioned from corporate to creative and philanthropic work?
Yeah. Another great question. I think it's more about I think it's less about titles and org charts. And like I said earlier, I think it's more about the impact you can bring. I think one thing that many people kind of forget is that you can be a leader as an individual contributor, right? You don't have to have this management title or whatever. You don't need to be high up in this org chart to truly be a leader. You can be the change that you want to see in the organization. Like, don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I've said this before in other talks, once you stop worrying about what people think about you can accomplish so much. And I encourage others to do that if they're working in a role and they're an hourly employee at some organization, you can still be a leader, right? Leadership is about intention and influence, and you certainly can influence others, even though you necessarily don't have this particular title, for example. So I think if you show up with purpose, I think if you're transparent with those around you, you can really create something that has value in people's lives. You're a leader. And I mean, we could go down this path about the differences between, a manager and a leader. I think that they are completely different things. I've had both in my professional career, and I will tell you, you definitely know who those leaders are that really are looking out for your best interest. They're looking at ways to help you grow they're looking at ways that, they're not looking at just managing a person and process. They're looking at how can we better the entire organization and how can I make your path better? That's what a leader is. And so, they're inspiring you to be better, right? That's what you should be doing. And that's what I'm trying to do now, right? With my board of directors on the foundation, it's really how do I help light a fire under them to do their best work? That's what a leader does.
Awesome. Excellent. And kind of along those lines, with your wide array of experience, what have you learned about bringing people together around a shared goal?
Yeah. So I think the big thing, believe it or not, is there is no substitute for in-person meetings. I mean, as much as I don't know if I'm an introvert, but I mean, at first when COVID happened, I was like, oh, great. I don't need to go into the office. I'm going to work from home. But I'm telling you, after a few weeks of just me and talking to my cat, it, I was craving that. And then I noticed that going to meetings following COVID, right? I went to, some conferences and stuff like that. I truly started appreciating the hallway conversations, the
Mhm.
the conversations on your way to lunch. Like some of those things where that's where you really find value and you get to meet those people. I probably had thousands and thousands of dollars of free consulting by having those conversations over lunch. Like, let's go grab a burrito. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I think really having those in-person conversations with others definitely help. And I think once you start working and having real discussions with those people and understanding their challenges, but also understanding where their strengths are, then you can start making connections with people. And I think that has huge value. So you're talking about building community. So many times that, I might be talking with someone about a certain thing and you're like, "Hey, you know what? You're challenged. You're trying to find someone that can help you do this thing. Let me make an introduction." And I send an email to introduce this person to someone else. Because so many people think how to do something, right? They're Googling it, they're asking ChatGPT, like, how do I do this thing? And they kind of rarely think about who I should ask about that thing. And so I think that's one thing about bringing people together. I've said this before too. You can be, especially if we're talking like, let's just take financial, like personal finance or financial independence for an example. You can be a smart person. You can understand the math. You can read blogs and books and listen to podcasts and kind of, the nuts and bolts on how it works, right? But until you go and have real conversations with other people that are either on the path or have done it before you, it just changes it somehow. It really does. You get those little things that they share. I had a problem doing this, or you know what really helped me? I did this, or whatever the case is. Or I'm like, oh, you know who is really good at that? I'm going to introduce you to this person. That's the power of community. I think that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I agree definitely about just the collaborative essence from being in person. Because
Mhm.
sometimes it just almost feels like like a floating head on the screen. So
Yeah.
sometimes, if it works for your business, that's any business. It's great to do remote and have the option, but it is good to
Mhm.
really get together and
Totally.
collaborate.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. So after years in tech, what do you miss and what don't you miss?
Oh, wow. Well, the first thing, what I don't miss is having 10 or 12 meetings in a day. I was talking with someone else on an earlier podcast today, talking about, man, once now that I've kind of experienced now being in control of my own calendar, going back to going back to corporate would be really, really hard. So I think the biggest thing is just meetings. And it's not only just the meetings. I think it's the meetings that necessarily don't matter. You know what I mean? It's the meetings that, are we really providing value? Are we moving the needle? Could this meeting have been an email? I mean, literally, that's the meme, right? Some of that. And again, I just listened to a podcast earlier on my drive that was talking about, once you get over like 5 people in a meeting, it's really hard to make sure you're all getting value. And so just imagine some of those meetings where you actually have 10, 12, maybe 20 people in, you're really not gonna, there's so many things that are getting missed in those meetings. So that's something I do not miss is the meetings or my calendar being completely full. I think what I do, I mean, there are things that I miss for sure. Um, working on, you know, new, just new creative workflows that are really helping certain companies do their best work that help their customers. I do miss working on some of those type of projects, but I think the main thing that I miss, interesting, we just talked about community. That's probably the most thing, like the thing I miss most is community. It's the work and tech community while I was working because we could nerd out over something that was new and exciting or a new piece of tech, where it's like now I bring it up and people will like, I don't know what you're talking about. It happens so often. Like I know, I'll watch, something new. I'll watch like a keynote or something, and I'll bring it up at like one of my real estate meetings. I'm like, hey, did you guys catch this thing? And they're like, what are you talking about? No. Anyway, so I think community is probably one of the number one things that I miss for sure.
Yeah, that shared experience of, talking shop, but also problem solving, I think. I
Yes,
could see how,
totally.
yeah, I could see
100%.
how you'd miss that for sure. So kind of wrapping up, and we did touch on it with your foundation a bit, but feel free to expand even more. So what's next? Foundation growth, definitely a part of it, but what else is on the docket for 2026?
Yeah, man. So I think continuing with heavy metal money for sure. I want to continue to grow there. I know that one thing that I've been doing that's actually gotten some pretty good feedback and engagement is doing these daily kind of infographics where I
Mm.
kind of break down, a financial concept in kind of its simple one-shot infographic to kind of help people understand this is the power of compounding or whatever the concept that I'm trying to help others understand in a really simple way. And that's super fun for me. I've been doing that. So I'm going to continue to grow heavy metal money for sure. We actually have some great things coming up too. Partnering with another podcast that some of you may know out there, Stacking Benjamins, which is another finance podcast. And I'm going to be working with them on some in-person events. Again, bringing people together in person to talk about just not necessarily finance, but money, life, just living your best life. So I'm going to be doing that. I think now that we have really built a stronger board of directors on the foundation side, I'm really excited to really make a bigger impact in 2026 and beyond. I think now that we actually have some key change makers on the board, people that are truly vested, their heart is in it, and they come from the healthcare space. They come from the legal space. They come from their personal experience of also having a NICU baby in there for weeks at a time. So I think we're going to make some really big things happen, especially with our in-person events as well. So that's going to be exciting. Another thing too is real estate, right? I'm not leaving real estate. Like you mentioned in the intro, I have been investing in real estate since 2017. All of that has been in residential real estate, typically single family homes. Um, but now I'm currently working on my first new construction commercial development. So it's a family practice and urgent care with rehab facility. It's a medical clinic locally here that's being built and it's going to be open spring of 2026. I was just out there this morning. We got the parking lot down. We got the curbs in, and we're going to start framing any day, please, any day. So yeah, we're trying to beat the weather. So those of you that may
Mm.
not be here, we're trying to get in before the hard freezes, and we're going to have to bust through some frost to get some septic tanks into the ground. But yeah, so we're trying to do as much as we can before the snow flies, but that's exciting. So that's just one of the new, again, commercial developments that we got cooking here coming up this spring.
Wow. Wow, that's just wonderful. So many great things going on.
Thank you, man.
This has been great, Chris. But that's going to be a wrap on the Bullpen podcast. Really enjoyed this conversation. I've loved how you turned experience into impact. And for everyone listening, I hope this episode reminds you that success doesn't have to look one way. Whether you're chasing financial independence, starting your own venture, or giving back to a cause that matters, what Chris shows us is that it's never too late to reinvent yourself and to do it with purpose. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the Bullpen podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who could use a bit of inspiration to take control of their path. Chris, again, thank you so much for sharing your story with the Bullpen, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.